We're going to start with Dez Holmes, and Dez is the Director of Research and Practice, which is an incredibly important organisation. I'm not going to say much about it because I think you probably will.
I'll do a bit,
yeah, about it. But also, she was, I wasn't not sure if it's Programme Manager for C4EO, which again was incredibly important. And probably the organisation that did the thing of actually using the internet and digital availability in order to bring research into and accessible to practitioners working on the ground in a really sort of dynamic way. So she's an innovator clearly, and she's going to talk to us. That her title is Beyond Broadcast, so I think that's really intrigued by what that means. And she'll talk to us about 20 minutes to half an hour. There'll be a bit of time for discussion after that. Okay?
Thank you very much. Forgive the Kirsty Walk style sitting on a table, but if I go behind there I'll get in the way of myself, and I realise I've just put a hole in my tights. So if I can cleverly hide it from the camera by looking terribly Channel 5 News for you all. Yes, it's very off-brand. So, dead easy getting research into practice, isn't it? Because essentially the evidence is just the truth, it's the facts, ma'am, and there's a right and a wrong way, so how hard can it be? And I think that it's quite tempting, and I think particularly it's tempting for policymakers to think that that's what it does. Research will tell you the right answer, the wrong answer, off you pop, go and do good social work now. So impact's dead easy, you get your ref. But of course, it's not quite like that. Well, if you look at this, these little kiddie winks here, it's not actually Brighton, so relax, any public health folk here. And these children are having a lovely time playing on the sewage pipe, and who amongst us wouldn't at the age of 6, right? So clearly there's a sign saying, do not climb, play on, and around the pipe. And I want you to very, very quickly, because otherwise you'll be in that Friday night zone, your brains aren't working. And why do you think these kids are not following the instructions? This is your shout-out time.
Didn't read the sign?
Didn't read the sign, yeah.
It's more fun.
Hang on a second, non-compliance. Yeah,
it's more fun.
Yeah.
They did read the sign, yeah.
And?
Don't believe it.
Don't believe it, yes, right. Credibility, yes. Whilst?
Everyone else
Conformity, yeah.
because there's instructions and rules are made to break.
Absurdity, perversion, absolutely, yes. Humanity, also known as.
And they're doing it and they're clearly fine, so why would...
There are no consequences not following these guidelines or rules.
They're following each other.
Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing like normative behaviour to, avarice, pathos, eros, that kind of thing. And the group, that's all that drives us, really.
It doesn't say why you shouldn't climb.
No rationale. Quite, why the hell not? It's not telling me there's lots of raw poo, or the poo's a bad thing. I'm 6, I think it's rather good.
Common sense shows them it's nonsense.
Yeah, no one else, there's no sharks jumping out of this pipe. None of my peers have become harmed by this. What's the issue? Yeah. So, there's another point there. You absolutely picked up on most of the issues that apply to research and research utilisation and indeed policy meaningfulness. Things like accessibility. We don't know if these children can read. We don't know if they can read in that language. So there's a whole about accessibility. There's absolutely no rationale for it, as we pointed out. There's no kind of sense about conformity and norms or rest. There's also no relevance. It's not solving their problem. It's not saying, for example, you will be able to jump off higher from this rock than you can from this pipe, which is what they're bothered about, let's say. So there's no relevance or responsivity to what they're trying to do. And it's not their rules. There's no ownership. And this is, to me, broadly exactly why we don't get research into practice very easily, and why most policies are not adhered to. A very, very credible academic mind in management, this is my stepdad actually, so that's says, when I got my first management job a while ago, said, what you need to do about managing people, they do 3 things. They only do 3 things: what they're good at, what they enjoy, and what you check up on. And never a truer word was said about people management. And I really think that, if we want people to start using research, including policymakers, then, you need to be applying at least 2 of those 3 things, I suggest. It's all right though, because health have got it nailed. Beautiful bench to bedside little loop here. Anyone work in health and got a health background? Dead easy then, right? Blue inhaler, brown inhaler, red pill, blue pill, that kind of thing. Really nice, very mechanistic, very linear process by which there are lots of systems, quite neat and very well established systems, which say, research says X, therefore treatment is Y, patient receives ish. It's not quite that clear. but compared to social work, it's a walk in the park, I suggest. It's a bit more like this. This shows it being bi-directional. It actually is, I think, I said earlier, multi-directional. And even this actually is a wild simplification. Have I got a thingy on here?
Yeah.
I have, yes. Oh, this is exciting. We talked about impact earlier, and it's not just the impact of the findings, but the impact on, let's say, the sector of being asked what research is relevant. That's quite profound in itself, and we haven't been really recently started doing that broadly. The impact of being involved in knowledge brokerage, the impact of being able to transfer your knowledge from practice back into research. It's not simply the findings and the impact they have on practice, it's the impact on the sector and on practitioners and on citizens of being engaged meaningfully in research. Which I'm going to witter on a little bit about later. So it's none of those critical diagrams. I would liken research utilisation to being rather more like this. Sandra Nutley and folk up at, what name is it, RURU. Now I can never remember whether it's the research unit for research utilisation or research utilisation research unit. Either way, they're up at St Andrews. Nice outfit. And she talks about, and other colleagues talk about research utilisation being a highly social and dynamic process. It's not mechanistic. It's not a case of find an empty vessel, a passive recipient of knowledge, pour it in, watch the magic happen, as you will all know. It's much more like a ballroom dance class, I would suggest, with some interpretive dancers who've made their way in gate crash. So it's deeply personal, it's not very coordinated, it's a whole range of motivations. I suspect that fella's there to keep his wife happy, I suspect this one's here to lose weight. They're all going at a slightly different pace, some of them are really, really good and they're in it for the glory, others have been dragged along, and most of them can't hear the background music, or the mood music. So, as you lot will all know very, very keenly, because you eat, sleep, breathe this particular conundrum, passive dissemination is simply not very effective. I'm not going to go into the detail of some of the Nutley work there about the 5 key mechanisms. Dissemination, broadly not worth the paper it's written on, sorry. But then interaction, which is more what you've been talking about, the social influence. Just a minute ago I had to ask, there was a hashtag for this, it's how modern and youthful I am. Yes? It was quite depressing. No one said, oh, that's very clever of you, but of course there is this. That social influence thing, the facilitation of it, and incentives and reinforcement. What the hell's in it for me? Why should I, as a busy, jobbing social worker, listen to your research? I've got a caseload before you, and a serious case to do. My boss has been off sick for 6 months. You know, I might have a life outside of work as well, if I'm very lucky. What relevance is your research to me? So, all of that stuff. I am so depressed by being approached by academics who say, would you mind having a quick look at my dissemination strategy and telling me if it's any good? The fact you've called it dissemination means I already know the answer. Probably not. I'm not that brutal with them. But the point is we've got to get beyond the broadcast. An executive summary is not dissemination. I'm not disabusing anything you don't know, because you're CIRCY and associates. But there are colleagues out there who still think a bit of telling is as good as saying, anyway. So we're still doing an awful lot of this at people. This is a beleaguered social worker, as you can see. You can't see, of course, because you can't really see the bags under her eyes and the terrible big fingernails and bleeding cuticles, and so on and so forth. But we'll assume she is a beleaguered social worker. And we are still adopting a very traditional broadcast model to research, to knowledge exchange or knowledge transfer, which I think is a vaguely insulting term, actually. Transfer, like a bank transfer, I've got it, you can have it. What about we've got it and we can make new stuff together if we combine? Yeah. Not CIRCY, of course, which is why I'm here. I'm so excited that you guys exist. So, this is where RIP comes in. Research and practice, our mission is to build capacity in evidence-informed practice in services for children. I'm going to come back to the notion of evidence-informed practice in a moment. Building capacity means that we work with our members, about 2/3 of the English local authorities, half of Wales, functional universities, and some of the big charities like CAFCAS, NSPCC. That's our gang, if you like. And we work with them to build their capacity. So this means we don't just give you some summaries on neglect or summarise research on domestic violence, but also come and train your staff in how to access research, how to appraise it so you don't put Wikipedia directly in your court reports, stuff like that. So the skills around research utilisation. And I'll talk a bit more about how we do that in a minute. So I guess we are what is known as a broker in the knowledge mobilisation world. When I'm at dinner parties and things and people say, what do you do? Occasionally when I want to come across as a better person, I say, I run a children's charity. And everyone thinks you're marvellous. I say, which one? The Africans? for children disabled. It's glorious and wordy like that. And I said, we're really into evidence utilisation and knowledge brokering. And people glaze over. And so now I say I'm a nurse sometimes. Recovering children's service practitioner. It's a deeply, deeply unsexy, unglamorous field to work in. There is no hope of me ever being able to put out a calendar with black and white photos of kind of Vaseline on the lens, soft image, you know, kiddies and their parents for fundraisers. You know, who cares about it? You don't know that you need evidence underpinning your practice until you haven't got it, or until, bluntly, the proverbial hits the fan. And then it's a bit like an insurance policy, you miss it when it's not there. But it is a wholly, wholly unglorious bit of the sector to work in, I have to say. And you are seen as either an idealist to those who are busy and say, I haven't got time for that, oh God, well, I've just got to think about what Ofsted are telling me to do, never mind what research is telling me to do. Or you're seen as an irritant, for example, when policymakers want to promote abstinence-only sex education, and you have to point out rather vociferously that all the evidence says that's actually quite harmful to children. So, you know, you're not wildly popular. What was the next? Yes, so this is again from Natalie and Davis stuff. She talks about, they talk about 3 models of how organisations become evidence informed. So what we're about in RIP is we use a lot of their framework, their theoretical framework in our work. She talks about the research-based practitioner model. Some of you, now you will all be this type of person, I suspect, because of your background, but if you think of a local authority, and some colleagues will notice, it's the kind of organisation where there's 1 or 2 or 10 real keen types, you know, always one sending out, there's a terrifically interesting article in such and such, and everyone goes, shut up, Mike, I'm a bit busy, mate, you know. But they're what was called a boffin when I was in school, I don't know what the youth are calling it now. Terribly keen, they don't stick around, of course, because their CVs are better than ours, so they move on quite quickly. So it's a completely unsustainable model for organisations, and it depends on one person's passion, enthusiasm, and geekery. Then there's the embedded research model, which health professions are probably more aligned to this, where the use of evidence is so embedded and formalised and woven through the entire system that it becomes completely unconscious. So if you stopped many clinical health practitioners and said, can you just explain to me why such and such, because the NICE guidelines say, can you just explain how, because we always do 7 hours per month of CPD, so there's not often an individual consciousness around their use of evidence, which is fine actually in health. I don't want my GP to stop and reflect and pontificate every time they make a decision for me. Kind of do what my social workers do actually, given the issues they work in. So there's, you know, I'm not criticising that model, but it's not appropriate for, let's say, much of the social work world. And then there's this organisational excellence model, as it's known, and it's like when you see it in the bloodstream of an organisation. So examples would be when you see organisations, and I really have seen glimpses of this in some local authorities, despite the enormous pressures that the government are under, where they will have policies. So let's say the supervision policy is based upon what research says good supervision should look like. So the late great Toni Morrison's actually referenced in their supervision policy. That. But it's not just that, it's that they use their complaints data to inform what their training programme should look like next year. We won't just commission endless stuff from charity X on domestic violence, because all our complaints about they don't talk to dads. We might want to do some configuration of data there. So it's things like that. It's also in the culture. I was once with a director of children's services who was proudly telling me that his outfit was really, really into evidence. And then a newly qualified practitioner approached us in the corridor, in the sort of lobby bit, and said to the director, yeah, actually I'm unhappy because you've brought in some sort of leave and toil policy, and it's completely at odds with what all the research says about workforce health. And I just thought, oh, actually, go on, fair enough, you really are that kind of authority. If you've got your newbies coming and challenging your DCS. So it's where you can see it in everything that is done, and it's not just the use of research, it's the use of all forms of evidence, and it is no mean feat, as you can imagine. And research organisations are very, very rarely embodying that approach, actually, interestingly. Right, we talked about earlier, what RIP says is that we're about evidence-informed practice as opposed to evidence-based practice. And you know, it is worth just spending a wee bit of time on. I'm not going to go into all the detail of this. This is a model that Barlow and Scott used in a 2010 review, and I'll have to send out references and links afterwards. But essentially we're talking about the triangulation of research evidence, practice expertise or professional perspective, sometimes called tacit knowledge, and service user views or the consumer perspective, if we're going to be terribly zeitgeist about it, and where the crossover is. So the crossover between research evidence and practice expertise being in things like evaluation of practice and outcomes monitoring, so on and so forth. And the reason why we feel it's very important to talk about this as a framework for evidence use rather than evidence-based programs and practice is things like randomised control trials, gold standard research, QEDs also play a really, really important part in the wider tapestry of what needs to be available to our workforce. You'll be aware that Ben Goldacre, who I formerly was a little bit in love with and now have cooled towards, he's devastated by this of course, he's been involved in a review with the DFE colleagues to, they're big into RCTs now, Department of Education. Terrific for some stuff, you know, would like my kid to be taught maths in a certain way if it's proved to be effective. Not entirely appropriate for an awful lot of what happens in social work. I don't really want to see Wigan local authorities say this half of our social workers will be given really good quality reflective supervision and this half will be given coffee breaks. That's not really how I want to see it play out. So there's an issue around RCTs not always being available or appropriate or ethically appropriate to use and so on and so forth. And linked to that, we can't wait in stasis until there's a huge body of research behind everything before we act. So we can't just say to Peterborough, I'm afraid there isn't much research actually about Roma children who've been sexually exploited, so could you just do nothing with them and there'll be a really, really high quality bit of research that comes out in 5 years' time. Yes, demographic change is being somewhat a pace of research. The very nature of good research is it takes time. So there's a whole issue around kind of the time lag and just the realities of what practice requires. Talking about realities actually, there's another issue where local implementation is a problem. So there are, as those of you who I'm sure keenly read the early intervention review that Graham Allen has brought out, has led to the Early Intervention Foundation. Broadly a very, very good bit of work and great to have the Early Intervention Foundation established. But it talks about essentially 19 proof positive programmes that should be applied, and broadly only those should be applied. So I've gently tried to disabuse Graham Allen of this notion and stop returning my calls eventually. So, but the issue that we have with that is there's a lot of examples where local implementation doesn't work. You can't take something that's glorious in Massachusetts, slap it into the middle of Manchester, and they go, oh, why hasn't that panned out terrifically? There's a much more sophisticated notion, things like common factors and common elements theory, rather than just programme fidelity, which was the mantra just a few years ago. There's a lovely anecdote from Parentman Plus, might publicise this, with the, I think it's Triple P or Strengthening Families, one of those manualised programmes for parents. It was about parenting adolescents. And they're implementing it, I think, in Southwark, and they phone their trainer person saying, can we change some of the content to make it relevant? No, fidelity is king. Can we just make a really, really small change to some of the content because we think it's not going to be relevant to our parents? No, you must not. Thou shalt follow the manual, and if you're not on page 13 by 7 minutes past 1, and it won't work if you don't. And they were showing this video clip, and they really didn't want to do it, and the programme coordinator, the licensee, says, you must, fidelity is absolutely paramount. So this poor woman had to try and show a room full of parents in a estate in Southwark. Watch this video, it's about a teenager who won't clean the pool. And you've lost the crowds. So there's a whole issue about local relevance, topicality and responsivity. Also, actually, this is a personal view, not the party line, you can probably edit it later. I really strongly reject the notion that we need a research-compliant workforce. We had a guidance-compliant workforce under the previous new managerialism administration, and no kid was safer. We need a research-literate workforce, people who are hungry for knowledge and critically curious and professionally intrusive into the knowledge base, and also see themselves as being active players in contributing to that knowledge base, not passive recipients of it. The fact that you can follow the manual means nothing other than the fact that you can follow the manual. It does not mean that you're providing really effective support intervention. So the whole kind of issue around compliance and safety. There's also something as well about the values of it. Traditional research methods and some of the approaches to manualised programmes, it's actually at odds with the social work values, where we're trying to, it's an empowerment model, it's about addressing disenfranchisement, and it's about enabling people to be active change agents in their lives. Researchers, research participants, not research subjects. So there's a kind of disconnect for me actually about some of the traditional methods to the profession itself. And my final point is there's a lot of people making a lot of money out of licensing Emperor's New Clothes. And I have some concerns, some of the manualised programmes and the research-based interventions that there's some of them which are just basically good quality social work with some handouts. So, broadly, and again I'm happy to send references out to some of this, the things that get in the way, barriers and demotivators to using evidence within our sector. The policy itself, sometimes not very evidence informed. I'd like to draw your attention, as the Baroness will be keenly aware of, to the removal of the duty to promote contact in the Children and Families Bill, despite the fact that research pretty compellingly tells us that family contact and identification with a family network is a really critical part of forming a sense of belonging, identity and healthy, all the well-being measures for children who enter the care system. Ditto the removal of the need to consider ethnicity when matching, despite the fact that research is very compelling that along with other factors, considering ethnicity is pretty critical. So sometimes our policymakers forget to access the evidence in their decision making. Which is unfortunate for them and us. See me after class. The users themselves actually can be a barrier to use of evidence. So a good example of this would be in adult social care. There's been a huge drive towards personalisation, which there is some compelling evidence for some of those mechanisms within the personalisation agenda, but it does require the general public to say, oh, okay, I'm not entitled to that support that my nan used to get. So we as service users, clients and citizens can be one of the barriers. Employers not creating the right culture, not the right mechanisms. Local authorities, God love them, where they won't be like, they can't use Google Scholar searches and things. We've got some colleagues here from the government, and I'm sure you can relate to that. Can't look at the research around breast cancer when supporting a child whose mother is dying because the word breast is blocked on your intranet system. That's happened to a member of my staff once. Ridiculous stuff like that. There is no library, it's not built into sufficient go forward, so on and so forth. Individuals themselves, I'm too tired, I'm too busy, it's a bit snooty, it's not recently research. Had that said to me by people, terrifyingly. We don't hire and fire on the basis of whether you're research literate. We should, I would argue. And the evidence itself, and this is perhaps where some of you guys come in, it's often really inaccessible in the way it is presented, in what is presented. It is often not relevant to practice, it's often 5 years too late, and you keep sending summaries to other academics, who I suspect are interested but perhaps not integral to its application. Just a thought. Some of the stuff that helps though, and again this is where you guys come in, strong leadership. And I'm yet to find an issue where leadership isn't the first bullet point that helps. Strong leadership, the culture around it, is it valued, not just valued but demanded of you in your workplace, communication between the practice arena, the research community and within organisations about the use of research, support to understand and use it, which is I guess RIP's role, and commitment, because it's not easy, you've got to stick at it, you've got to really stick at it, and it's a bit thankless. I'm not going to go over this, but these are essentially the push factors that we use in RIP to help professionals understand why it matters. This is about you seizing the social work agenda because everyone has to give you a kicking. This is about you being able to make a business case for early intervention. This is about you being able to stand up in court and make the right call in 26 weeks, please. All that kind of stuff. This matters for all those reasons. But you've got to appeal to the intrinsic motivations. This matters because God knows if we're not going to try and do the stuff that works best for these children, for the most marginalised children and families in society, we might as well all just pack it in. That's why you come to work. What's that Japanese term? Ikigami? A reason to get up in the morning? Evidence helps you have that, because it means that you're doing the right thing for the right reasons, in a way that's likely to work in the best way. Anyway, so RIP does, I will really jump over these because it's probably the least important bit. RIP helps because we do this 360-degree support. We try and hit all levels of the organisation to all learning styles. So we follow, this is from the evidence around product development. If you're really nerdy and want to talk to me about it, I will go through this wheel with you after my talk. But essentially, we are trying to be evidence-informed in the way we provide evidence-informed support. Very meta. Now, we do stuff like big, thick handbooks full of supervision tools and briefings and stuff you can use in practice, and they're about yay thick. And we do research reviews. We've got a really exciting one coming out in March on children and young people presenting with sexually harmful behaviour, because it's one of those horrible, horrible issues which is no one's, well, it's everybody's headache, so it's no one's priority. Because the police say, well, unless they're going to be old enough for us to prosecute, not our problem. Social care is saying, well, it's kind of a bit tricky, they're kids on kids, and we can't quite prove it's coercive. Department of Health is saying, yeah, but this is really bad, it doesn't actually cost the health service any money. So it's a bit of an issue, it's about to become a very hot topic. We've got a research review coming out. If you really want to blag me for a place at our conference, 20th of March, I'm a bit of a soft touch for that kind of thing. We do a whole lot of things for frontline practitioners, big research review online, and then these, I keep calling them handbag tools, I think they're supposed to be called something less gendered than that, glove box tools or something. The point being that you can take them out to your work with the family, you can sit in the kitchen, you can say, yeah, you know how you got really annoyed when the social worker said you had attachment difficulties? This is what we mean. Do you see how he's playing? Do you see how he doesn't look at you? And this is what all the researchers say about it, and it's not just that I don't like you, so it's about really meaningful, applied devices to get research into practice. Stuff you can spill your coffee on and tear a corner off and get grubby and put in your handbag or your non-gender specific, sack. We run loads of events, partnership conferences, team manager workshops, in-house workshops, blah, 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 webinars, because we're that modern, so on and so forth. We've got a website, astonishingly. Oh, we do evaluation support. I'm not going to major on that, but it's really important. The sector's got to start taking charge of its own evaluation. This is nice. Change projects. In essence, we pick a topic, we bring together a bunch of local authorities and academics, they dissect the knowledge between them, they create and co-produce new knowledge around that issue. We've got one on parental capacity change at the minute. They spend 6 months meeting each other every month and doing little mini research projects back at the ranch. They come together and they produce a load of pilot resources. We then test them with another group of 10 or 12 authorities, and we end up with a final bit of kit, which is beautifully research rich, but very, very practice focused. It's resource intensive, but quite an exciting model. Very happy to talk to anyone who's particularly onto that. A word on innovation. Evidence does not get in the way of innovation. That fellow is saying, I'll be happy to give you innovative thinking, what are the guidelines? Which is somewhat where we've managed to get the children's sector after some of the guidance heavy stuff. The point being that evidence doesn't stop you being innovative. It helps you to be socially responsible in your innovation, I would argue. So you can draw upon theory or evidence from other fields which may be applied. You can still innovate, but if you're doing something completely wild and off the wall and new, there's still relevant research you can draw upon. There's still relevant evidence you can draw upon, and you can still gather a baseline, show us your workings out, keep taking measurements across that, and capture what you've done so someone else can use it. Innovation doesn't mean go bonkers and you're not accountable to anyone else who uses your knowledge base. This is quite important, this third generation approach. Evidence also does not mean we're devaluing professional wisdom and judgment. It is in no way anti the Monroe agenda. And what we need to have is evidence-based actuarial tools with professional judgment, and in what Barlow calls structured professional judgment. It is not enough to have a children's social worker who understands the graded care profile and is really hot on standardised measures for neglect. We also have social workers who are brave, courageous, observant and attuned enough to see the difference between he's got mud on his knees, that means he plays football, as opposed to he's got grime in his collar, that means he's not getting washed. It's that sort of visceral reality that social workers are dealing with. Research won't give you all of that. I'm not going to go into this in great detail, but I will share my slides. This is a checklist produced by Ruru as to what academic colleagues can do to help research get used more widely and more effectively. There is nothing in there that you don't know, I suspect. I also suspect that if you were to audit your work against those points, you might not give yourself 5 out of 5 for all of them. I've got a more extensive set of slides on each of those 8 points, which I'll share with you afterwards, because it might be helpful in some of the work that you're doing. This is from Unilever. They spend millions of pounds a year on behavioural psychologists to make us buy stock cubes and Dove soap and all the rest of it. They know more about change of behaviour than most people in the world, I would argue. And if you want to get someone to change their behaviour, i.e. to use research, this is what you need to do. Make it understood, make it easy, make it desirable, rewarding, and make it a habit. This is essentially what we're trying to do in RIP with our partners. There's a whole, I could talk all day about this, I won't. I would say there's a 6th one missing. They've got millions of quid, I've got an opinion. I reckon they're missing a point, which is to make it personal. Why is it solving my headache? How is it speaking to my sense of ikigami? How does it help me, my issues, my beliefs, my values, my reason for working in this field? What is the point of it to me? So prevalence studies, bluntly, don't. They're important, it's vital that we have such data, but they are not going to get me to read until 2 in the morning when I'm up again at 6 to deal with my caseload. But something that says, this is how you manage relationships with a family presenting as hostile or resistant to change, that just might. And especially if it's short and it might have pictures. So on that, because I did talk about the art as well as the science, we did a really daft project with some of our link officers, people that work with us in local authorities, and some Swedish folk about what does evidence mean to you. And they just got the most glorious quotes. I'm done in 30 seconds. because I just think they're wonderful and beautiful and artistic and creative, totally unhard sciencey about what evidence means to them. They're all social worker practitioners. I won't read them in a Swedish accent because that will come across terribly bad if we won't add context. Evidence is to a practitioner what a rudder is to a boat, both rudder and sail, actually. It's like the compass and the safety helmet to a climber. It's the recipe that helps you know what you're doing and why you're doing it and what difference you've made. This is my favourite. It protects you and it gives you confidence, like wearing shin pads and stilettos at the same time. There's a further sentence, but less insane, obviously. That was a Swedish colleague who said that, but less insane, obviously. Really, really enjoyed it. And this, I think, has never been more pertinent than it is now. We are living in extraordinary times, not just in children's services, not just in the public sector per se. All of us, I think, are in the most extraordinary time of not just austerity, but chaos, frankly. And need is going up whilst resources are going down, and morale is somewhat under threat, I'd argue. And evidence is the raft you hold on to when everything else in your organisation is adrift. These are really personal relationships that these people have with evidence, and I think that's what we need to really hold on to and use it. And I think that's everything.
Fantastic.